Okay, hey everyone, welcome to an episode of On the Rest from Off the Cuff. To have a really cool prototype preview for you guys from the brand Astor+Banks. They're an independent US-based micro brand started by Andrew Perez to produce something he absolutely loved. These are all assembled in Chicago. And the type of watch, I'd say, although it does have, of course, a specific theme, I think overall it definitely fits within that everyday adventure watch space. Some key common characteristics and design language when you're looking for something within that genre. Of course, you're going to find something that is sporty, legible, and tough. This is known as their Terra Scout, and it's essentially their modern interpretation of the classic field watch. A watch that is rooted in military necessity, designed to be tough, legible, and reliable above all else. These are going to go for $9.95 direct, and this is a pre-production prototype preview, but good news for you, at the time of filming, these are actually estimated to be ready to ship sometime in March, and they also do include a 5-year warranty. Now, some of you are probably thinking, why so expensive from a micro brand? I will say, don't forget, this is packing the automatic LJP or Le Jeu Perret G100 in that Siange finishing, which is going to be the top grade. So, movement wise, it's definitely going to cost a bit more. Also, in terms of complexity and the execution, the dial aesthetics, even down to the dial details of the execution, there's definitely a lot more here. But yeah, it is on the more expensive side, so we'll just get that out of the way. Of course, this is just a pre-production prototype, so this isn't like one that I ordered on their site, so I don't know what the box opening experience is going to be like for those of you who do purchase these. This is a, essentially just a media sample that I'm spending a couple of weeks with. So with that said, let's go ahead and zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, so very original in terms of that design aesthetic. I'm really liking it. Very modern, especially during a time when, I think we're just coming out of just being oversaturated by vintage inspired reissues or reimaginings and all that. It's nice for them to just come straight up with something very contemporary, whether it be the material, the finish choices, everything just feels very, very fresh. And I have to say, I enjoy that a lot about this piece. In terms of the dimensions, comes in at a classic 38.5 millimeter in terms of the diameter, and then 12.5 millimeters thick. That's including that box dome sapphire. And then the lug to lug is just under 45 millimeters at 44.9. Again, this is all measured on my own personal calipers. And also you can see very cool in terms of the case shape. Look at that mid case with a nice turn down lugs. So very different. Of course, again, this is not a pristine brand new unit. This has been around. It's done some things. So if you see any imperfections, just understand that is part of, the part of the process when you're looking at stuff, and it is a press loaner. Now, the crystal, like I mentioned, box sapphire with an inner anti-reflective coating, and then the crown is screwed down and nicely signed. It's actually really has a very thin bezel, almost has a bezel-less design as you look at it head on, but then you can see there's a very thin sliver there, but I do think it is nicely proportioned against the case back protrusion. It has a nice symmetrical balance to it. And then the crystal itself doesn't protrude too much, and also you can see, even though it is sapphire, you're not going to see any unsightly milky ring on there. You are just going to get a bit of distortion, of course, at the far reaches where you're going to have the curvature of the box dome sapphire. Now, the movement inside, although you can't see it through this nicely etched case back, is going to be the automatic LJP G100 in that Siange level in terms of the finishing. So that's going to be their equivalent to top grade. It's going to have a 68-hour power reserve, so nicely extended, almost 70 hours, almost 3 days, just shy of that. But the nice thing is they're retaining the 4 hertz movement, so this is going to still have that full 28,000 800 vibration per hour beat rate, so very smooth, and it is actually adjusted in-house to plus or minus 8 seconds per day, which is a nice tight tolerance. Now, underneath this case back, you're also going to have a soft iron plate, so that you're going to get that anti-magnetic protection up to 20,000 AM, which is pretty impressive. Now, in terms of the dial, although of course I think aesthetically I'd consider it very clean and minimalist. It's not. It's actually quite complex. It has 3 layers. It's fully lumed. You have, of course, painted hands for maximum contrast, with some nice contrasting bursts of color there in the orange. This is pretty much going to be using Superluminova BGW9 grade A lume. So this is going to be very nice and potent in terms of how much it's going to glow initially, as well as how long it's going to last in terms of longevity. Grade A is going to be, of course, some of the more advanced modern lume that you can choose. Also, this has a water resistance of 660 feet or 200 meters. And of course, it's very confidence inspiring considering you do have that screw down crown. You have a 20 millimeter lug width, which is going to be very useful and very versatile. And the strap that was provided on is this tactical canvas strap that does taper down to 16 millimeters at that signed and milled pin buckle in that kind of IWC style, fully milled, even the finger there. Very nice, great precision tolerances, great contouring and bevel work, even though it is matte blasted. So very, very cool. It also does have quick release spring bars, and then you can see it has the underlining that is going to be leather, and then of course the top layer is going to have that tactical canvas, and you can see the stitching reinforcement there, also quite nice. So very cool. And then in terms of the production units, it's also going to come with an FKM rubber strap included, which I didn't get, but I'm sure it's going to be a nice one, and all the rage these days with FKM rubber straps. So with that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this sizing is quite classic, although the aesthetic is quite modern. I really do like that. Lays nice and flat. Feels quite premium, again, even though it's quite matted and very subdued. And of course, I didn't even mention, guys, when I had it in hand earlier, is going to be that dial. So very unique in terms of the date layout there. Of course, you'll just turn and then you'll get that disc, and then it'll tell you what day it is. So very interesting, very unique. And then again, I think aesthetically, it still gives you a nice amount of balance, just because of how symmetrical everything is still laid out. So very cool. It's one of those things where maybe it's not going to jump out at you, but when you're looking for the date, you can find it quite easily. Otherwise, of course, it all just kind of blends in as other information on an otherwise very kind of serene dial. Now, of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're noticing there's a fair amount of perspective distortion. All of a sudden, the watch seems a lot bigger on my 7.5-inch wrist, or 19 centimeters in circumference. But I keep it nice and low. You can see now, all of a sudden, you see the sides of the strap more. You're seeing the sides of my wrist more. They disappear, they fall away, they return. So what I'll do is keep my wrist nice and low, and then just tighten up the frame so that you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. So check that out. Again, very simple. And it's one of those things where, even though it does have some pops of color, right, with the orange, and I could easily see this paired to an orange strap to give you that kind of high visibility burst, and it be something that you take out to the snow-capped mountains. It also could easily be paired to like a brown leather strap and just be an everyday watch, especially considering the colors here, and of course the more military style of dial, where everything just feels very, very function forward. So I do like that. And look at that crystal. I have to say the crystal is probably the unsung hero of this timepiece. The execution on it's very, very nice. I gotta say, they know how to cut a crystal. And yeah, it's a good looking timepiece. I like the juxtaposition of the kind of more old school design here to see this curled down like that. And then of course, then you take a turn and you're like, wow, this multi-layer sandwich dial here. Yeah, it's a cool one. Again, it falls in this kind of category where it's like, it's not a watch I would probably ever ask for, where, but it's a watch when you find it, you can't help but think, wow, that's a good looking watch. So yeah, it's just one of those ones for me. I would love to pick Andrew's brain about how he came up with this piece, because again, I don't think this is something that people necessarily asked for, but I'm really glad that he brought it to the table, because it is something that again adds flavor to a space that is really predominantly dominated by, the Hamilton khaki or the Seiko Alpinist, right? So to have something like this that just gives you that kind of breath of fresh air, I think it's really cool. So that said, let's actually get it off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Oh, wow. Yeah, that Lume is absolutely astonishing. It kind of comes with the territory when you're talking about a fully loomed dial, but just look at how sharp the execution is on that dial, right? Look at how crisp the lettering is, the text, the even all of the numerals. It's just very, very nice, very sharp. And I absolutely can appreciate that in terms of, from an execution standpoint. And I'm not I love Lume, don't get me wrong, but fully loomed, look at my collection and my reviews. That's not something that I normally gravitate towards. I have to say here, though, this is cool. I really, really do like the way this came out. But one thing I like to work in is always going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming down to buildings, walking underneath overhangs, just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see those colors, textures, and finishes, and just get an idea of how they render in less than optimal lighting. And I have to say the transitions here are a lot of fun. Look at that, blue to white, but it's always high contrast. There's no chance of this ever getting washed out, and I can appreciate that. Oh my, I'm blown away. I almost want to hit it with a black light just to supercharge it more, just to let's just do that for fun. Just yeah, that's insane. Yeah, that is just, it is scary bright there. So very, very cool. High contrast again, whether it's full on sunlight or at an angle, sun's going down, sun's out of the picture, there's still going to be tons of visibility there. So I do like that a lot. And again, it fits a lot within this aesthetic being, very function forward. And its ultimate legibility is going to be huge. And of course, there's going to be the toughness. You're getting that soft iron cage around that movement, so you're going to have protection for that timekeeping that is in-house regulated on site in Chicago. So very, very cool. Yeah, I dig this one, and I get that it's not for everybody, because aesthetically it took a while for it to kind of rub off on me. Even I think at a glance, since it's not a silhouette I typically look for, it was one of those ones where on paper, I was just like, whoa, that looks cool. I'd love to share it. But I'll say after spending more and more time with it, I just think it's really different and cool. And I like that. So closing thoughts from me, guys. On wrist, classic proportions meet modern aesthetics. It feels really solid and substantial. Thanks, of course, to the soft iron plates there. While still also feeling compact, right? It doesn't feel like this big, oversized, tool piece, right? It actually still has quite a clean and kind of svelte aesthetic. So it's like a nice balance of feeling overbuilt while still feeling refined. In terms of model variants, do check the site links for options and availability. Of course, there's going to be not just fully loomed dials, there'll be some other options as well. There's some really cool case options, whether they be blasted like this or with coated options where you can get like a black or even some really cool kind of earthy tones as well. So do check out the links in the description. In terms of comparable models, guys, I'd say, yeah, I would have to compare this to something that's going to be more premium, independent Swiss field watch. I'd say this is probably in a similar vein as the Formex Field watch, blending both classic and modern elements in a really creative and distinctive, elevated way. So it's tough for me to say, oh, I'd say in the space, you think of models, of course, like the Hamilton Khaki Field or the Seiko Prospex Alpinist. But in terms of actual spec for spec, again, I would compare this to something that's going to be a little bit more unique and high-end and a little bit more feature-rich, which this is, right? Like, it has certain levels of complexity in terms of what they actually tried to do and what they ended up doing in terms of the execution level here, right? Like, this is not a very easy piece. This isn't just a simple printed dial. It's got layers. It has sharpness. It has just a certain level of refinement that I have to appreciate at this point. So, for me, guys, bottom line, I'm a huge fan of Andrew and everything he's done with the Astor+Banks brand. And this feels like a nice, fresh palette cleanser coming off of the well-deserved success of their popular Fortitude line, right? Which saw many different kind of spins and takes. So it's cool that they didn't just play it safe and just slightly pivot from what was already working, right? What was already popular, what people were like, ooh, I like this a lot. They kind of, lightning struck. They didn't just stick to that. Andrew went back to the drawing board and chose to bring something totally fresh to the table. And I admire the grit that it shows. And it goes with the theme of this watch, like being tough, bold, gritty, and able to kind of go with you on that journey. So yeah, I dig this one. It's cool, it's different, and of course, that's one of the things. Design is one of the factors now that really separate micro brands from factory brands. So good on Astor+Banks and their team for producing something that I think is worthy of this space and place. So let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do like, and if you're already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.